Let's face it, in our busy lives, we don't eat enough fruits and vegetables. In fact, according to the CDC, only 1 in 10 Americans are eating the recommended daily amount of fruits and vegetables each day, missing out on essential vitamins, minerals, fibers, and antioxidants. And that's where Balance in Nature comes in. Balance in Nature sources only the best produce, free from pesticides, heavy metals, and harmful bacteria. And Balance in Nature is the best fruit and vegetable product on the market. They use only fresh, whole fruits and vegetables inside each capsule. They don't use any GMOs, fillers, binding agents, or preservatives of any kind. You're getting real food, real science, real nutrition. I would never endorse a product that I don't use myself, and since using Balance in Nature, I feel more alert, I have more energy, my focus is sharper, and I feel great. Live life to the fullest and choose Balance in Nature. And guess what? PAS Report listeners can get 35% off the first preferred order. Start getting the recommended daily amount of fruits and vegetables you need by using code PAS at balanceofnature.com.
Welcome to the P.A.S. Report Weekly Roundup Podcast. The P.A.S. Report provides an honest analysis on the critical issues that matter to you without the biased media filters. Here's your host, Professor Nicholas Giordano.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the P.A.S. Report Podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano. Hope you enjoyed your weekend. Obviously, there's so much going on out there. I'm still in shock that we saw the assassination of the former Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe. He was assassinated, and I'm trying to figure out what it actually means for Japan and how the hell someone was able to get so close to the former prime minister. My condolences to the Japanese people. Shinzo Abe, to me, was a great leader, and he's someone that I actually respected as a world leader. I don't respect too many politicians, but he's certainly someone I did. And this assassination certainly shows how insane our media is, the mainstream media. They keep referring to Abe as this far-right ultra-nationalist, and I'm waiting for them to start referring to Abe as a white supremacist. That's how dumb our media has become. But I'm not going to harp on this, because I have a great guest coming in. I have Kurt Schlichter joining me. He's here to discuss his new book, We'll Be Back, The Fall and Rise of America. He's an author, an attorney, a commentator, a colonel. You've probably read some of his work on townhall.com. And before I bring in the colonel, make sure you hit the follow button so you never miss an episode. Go to the PAS Report website, pasreport.com, sign up for the newsletter, and share this episode with others. With that out of the way, I want to bring in Colonel Kurt Schlichter to the PAS Report, author of the brand new book, We'll Be Back, The Fall and Rise of America. Kurt, so great to have you here. How's everything going today?
Hey, I'm doing great.
I'm glad you could be here because I want to discuss this book. And I want to start off with the title because I think it's really important. A lot of the time I focus on the doom and gloom that's currently going on. So I like the title where it's optimism, the fall and rise, that there will be a rebirth, that there will be a rise, that this isn't irreversible, that we can reverse the trend. So what made you want to write that and explain how we reverse the trend?
Well, look, I don't believe in pessimism because there's nothing I can do with pessimism. I mean, what do you do with somebody who says, we're doomed, we're done? Okay, fine. I'll just go off into my corner and try and enjoy myself before I die. No, I don't think that's I find it boring. I find it tiresome. And sadly, it's too often the kind of thing conservatives glom onto. Conservatives, at least old school ones, tended to be very gloomy. But they were losers and they understood losing. So I guess that's kind of why. I'm not a loser. I don't think the modern conservatives are losers. I think we're competitive. I think we are in it to win and not simply to secure our places in the mediocre band of the hierarchy.
And I think that's a good point because all too often the old school conservatives would issue white paper after white paper after white paper that nobody would read and nothing would get done. And when you speak to people, they don't even know what conservatism is or where conservatives stand on the issue. So I think you bring up a great point. I just did an episode a couple of weeks ago explaining conservatism to people. And one of the aspects of your book that I want to talk about, you are someone who served in the last really successful war of the United States. When we look at the 1991 Persian Gulf War, I mean, if you look at the last 70 years, that was a clear-cut, defined victory that we had. It's indisputable. It wasn't a stalemate or anything like that. 30 years later, we look at the Taliban, this ragtag crew of people that we assume live backwards, and yet they're better armed and equipped today than they were in 2001. What happened?
I think it goes back to the failure of our ruling class. Back in the Gulf War days, we were still, kind of the second generation of America the Powerful. Let's take another example. Henry Ford, right? Mixed guy, had some issues, but nevertheless did some amazing things, revolutionized manufacturing, built a giant corporation, brought cars to the masses. Pretty impressive dude. Second generation of the Fords. Okay, well, they kept the company going, they expanded it, and they brought us the Mustang. That's pretty impressive, right?
I would agree.
Name a third generation Ford.
And that's a good point.
Yeah. They're probably parked in a beat-up Fusion outside a crack house.
Well, they do philanthropy, right?
Oh, yeah, philanthropy.
That's so what all the third generation does.
So what they've gone from building a giant corporation to giving away grandpa's money to every commie with a handout.
That wants to put them out of business.
Yeah, that wants to put them out of the business. Okay, now let's move that to our cultural mandarins, the folks with the credentials from the universities, the ones who are in the ruling class, who control our institutions. We had the ones in the ones as America became a great power. World War II, they beat Hitler, they beat Tojo, they beat the Depression. Pretty impressive. You want that on your res. The next generation, civil rights. They put a man on the moon. I'm impressed. That's pretty good. What does this generation do? Grinder? I mean, really, what's it done? Yes, we have some better technology. Okay, that's not nothing, but where is the life-changing improvements for the better? These guys are cultural trust fund babies, and that includes in the military. They were given something. They didn't earn it. They didn't build it. They have no real understanding of it. They don't feel it in the way that somebody who built it feels it. Like everyone who has inherited wealth, they are lesser than those they inherited from. And, they are lesser than the ones who won the Gulf War. They are less than certainly the ones who won World War II. They're unaccomplished, which brings me to another point. How do you get into our ruling class? You get it by adopting the values of the ruling class, and so you can have some tattooed nitwit as a barista who is falling in line with a zillionaire from Silicon Valley because they share the same values. Now, a quick way to get the same values is to jump into mainstream academia, where they're indoctrinated in them, as you well know. And it is one of the reasons I want to destroy academia as it's currently constituted. I don't see why I should subsidize my enemies, and they are my enemies.
And when you put it in that perspective, I mean, I want to get to accountability in a few minutes because nobody's ever held accountable in the bureaucracy or academia. But when we look at academia, so I'm someone that's been teaching since 2006. I've been teaching political science. I've noticed students are coming in with less and less knowledge about American government, how it works. They don't know the basic functions. They have opinions on everything. That's the amazing part. But what really drives me nuts is that I come from the private sector. Most of the PhDs that are in the academic sector went through college, went through their PhDs, got their dissertations approved, and taught. And so they never lived in the real world. It's always operating throughout theory, and theory doesn't translate into reality. How did we let it get this bad in academia? Why did conservatives for so long actually shy away from academia?
Well, a lot of conservatives, right now, the problem is the establishment versus the outsiders. And you can be conservative and in the establishment as long as you're satisfied to, have your mediocre status. You'll be comfortable. You'll get invited to some parties. You get to look down on others.
Who would want to go to their parties with these people, though? I mean, those are the worst parties I can imagine.
I can't imagine it either. A bunch of people sitting around and talking about how those dirty Jesus-loving gun Christians are ruining everything. It's very. Look, one of the problems is it's just the massive. There goes somebody doing a real job cleaning the street. You have these unaccomplished people, and they know they're unaccomplished. They've never done anything. They barely do a push-up. They've never been anywhere. I had a friend, very liberal, from out in California. We went to UC San Diego. If you ask UC San Diego, they'll tell you it's a top 10 school. My first legal scam was figuring out how to test in with SATs only. So I got in with Fs in high school. In any case, I went in the Army, and I lived in places like Alabama, Oklahoma, Germany, eventually lived in Kosovo. I was in the desert. I went to party with this guy, and we were going to New Orleans. He'd never been anywhere but California and New York.
And that's the way it is.
But that didn't stop him. That didn't stop him from knowing everything about everything. Nice guy, but, liberals are very parochial. Normal people have got to deal with different people all the time. Liberals have the advantage that they don't. I like to say, I live in California. I'm a Christian, veteran, and conservative. I'm like 3 kinds of diversity for most of my friends. I'm literally the guy they know who's one or more of those things.
You're the Antichrist.
Well, I'm the token. They're like, well, I know an Army guy. Kurt was in the Army, right? That's the one with ships, isn't it?
It truly is stunning. But you said something important. So these unaccomplished people are the ones that are in charge of the policy decisions. I mean, if you look at it. Because
getting back to the accountability thing, there is no accountability and there's no real meritocracy. You know what the hardest day at Harvard is?
No.
The day you fill out your application to get in. I mean, that's true. If you're admitted into Harvard, you're done. You're not going to flunk. I mean, you can try and flunk out. Okay, that's marginal. That's a fringe. The usual guy going to Harvard has got a life path set, and that will open doors for him, regardless of what else he's done.
And that is
because somebody, I look at in law. Somebody comes in with a Harvard on his resume, and then somebody with me. I went to more of a street law school, Loyola. All the trial lawyers came out of Loyola. Now, the intellectuals went to UCLA. And the rich kids went to USC, and all the big trial lawyers are Loyola in Los Angeles because they're the people who can go and talk to a juror. Maybe they're guys who've actually swept out a toilet, like I have. My first job was Carl's Jr. But you go to like Harvard. Raise your hands, guys. How many of you has ever worked at McDonald's? How many have ever been soldiers? They'll have a couple soldiers, but they'll be domesticated soldiers. They'll be soldiers who know what they're supposed to say.
And that's such a great point, too, because when I teach at a community college, we see at community colleges that we have to deal with real world people that have young adults having children at a young age. We have to deal with adults taking care of parents, adults that dropped out of school and decided to go back 20 years later. So we get to see the full spectrum, and we're more in touch with reality at the community college. But we still see this failure that exists within our government, within our bureaucracy. And now it's seeped out into almost every aspect of our society where competition and perfection is actually a negative, where we don't want competition anymore. Instead, we're going to accept mediocrity.
Competition goes hand in hand with accountability. If you're unaccomplished, if you can't actually do anything, what is the one concept you want to eliminate? You want to eliminate accountability. Also, it's kind of grating, right? You went to Princeton. And you're explaining to some guy who unplugs sewer lines for a living? Why should you explain to him? Why he should be glad that you're willing to help him run his life because he's not going to be able to do it on his own. So accountability is both a defense mechanism and a manifestation of unearned arrogance. It's not like these are super geniuses that we got to put. It's not like Dr. House who's going to diagnose the Mombasa River fever on the case of the week that no one else got. Okay. It's not like they're moody geniuses who we have to tolerate because that's their art. No, these are hacks who can't perform at the most basic level. So they want to eliminate performance levels completely.
And they view us as the peasant class,
Well, who are you to make me accountable? Well, I don't know. You were just screaming about democracy. Yeah, but I didn't mean that for you.
Well, it's funny because these people have no idea how democracy actually works. I mean, first of all, they never bring up the fact that we're a republic and we have democratic institutions in the House of Representatives. But if we look at the United States Senate, that's not a democracy. It was never built to be a democracy. Now they want to change it, though. Well,
look, I argue for a living, right? People come pay me hundreds of dollars an hour to go argue for them. But I'm good at it. I don't argue with the left because there's no point to it. Okay? They're not against the Electoral College. They don't think that there's something wrong with the Senate. Their problem is they're not getting their way. That's their problem. All the other stuff. That argument is important for normal people who have good faith. We have to argue only to teach our own people. I'm not arguing against the left anymore. I just want to destroy them and break them and use raw power. I'm not interested.
That's what the left does.
Well, it is. The only thing you get to pick in life is the lowest common denominator. You can either accept the one the other guy establishes or set your own lower. You can't set one higher. You can either take what the other guy's giving or you go lower. And if they want an environment that is run on pure power, as I put in the book, We'll Be Back, The Fall and Rise of America, there are three possible outcomes. One is a civil society where everyone has have some sovereignty and some voice and their rights are respected. That's option one. Option two is a dictatorship by guys like me. Option three is a dictatorship by guys like them. Now, I want number one. I grew up in it. I like it. I can live with number two. Number three means war.
Yeah, well, I think, isn't that why they hated President Trump so much? Because he took their own tactics and used it against them?
He was, there's so many reasons they am. First, he was a class traitor, and he didn't respect them. He didn't give them their due. And what really stung is they knew he knew them. Hell, half the politicians had groveled on their belly like reptiles before him for money. They would have been thrilled to get a invitation to Mar-a-Lago. And that really killed because he was a traitor. Everybody hates traitors more than anyone else. You know, I mean, all the Ted Lieu's and Adam Schiff, they're scum, but I don't hate them because they are what they are. They're just, enemies who need to be defeated. Kinzinger and Cheney are traitors, and I really hate them because I'm a normal human being.
Yeah, and I want to talk about Cheney because to me, she represents the worst of Washington, where...
Yeah, she's garbage.
We look at the FBI, well, first the NSA spying on the American people with the Patriot Act. Then you look at the CIA spying on sitting members of the United States Senate. You look at the FBI trying to take down a duly elected president. She didn't have any problems with the bureaucracy and the abuse of power.
No, she's for all that. You don't understand. She's for all that. She's not for democracy. She's for the restoration of the power for people like her, the cruise ship conservatives, the Bill Kristols, the Ahoy gang. She's for that. She didn't care. She didn't care about anything except her own personal power. She's a liar and a hack. She's the Beltway cowgirl. This whole congressional seat in Wyoming was just a means to the end. She's a Virginian. It's remarkably cynical, but it's clothed in this high morality. And I reject it all. I don't care. And I don't want to argue with them. I just want to break them.
And how do we do that?
Well, we do what we've been doing. And it's going to take a while. 15 Republicans signed on in the Senate to the dumb gun bill, the one that didn't stop the latest Democrat in a Democrat city killing other Democrats. It would have been 30 10 years ago. We're making progress. But, it takes time. It takes time. And one of the things that besides pessimism, I find unreasonable frustration by conservatives annoying. Well, we're going to take over the House of Representatives, but we aren't going to do anything. Well, we can do it. What can we do? Options are oversight and stopping things and negotiating some compromises, which will not be everything we want. Those are our actual options. Your frustration, fellow conservative, is it will not spur on any positive change, and it won't help, and it's frankly stupid. So stop doing it.
Well, and you have to they have to call out all the issues that we're seeing within the bureaucracy. They have to stand for something. But more importantly, one of the biggest failures was the whole idea of repeal and replace, where once the Republicans had the opportunity, they were arguing if 6 years they ran on it and then they get the power and they didn't have anything to replace it with.
Well, that's a big problem. It also didn't hurt that you had a John McCain who never met an establishment he didn't want to suck up to. I mean, it's just, look, it's frustrating. I get it, but it's going to be slow. We didn't fall into this. I started the pinnacle of American power, 1991 at 7 Corps headquarters, where I was at the end of the Gulf War, when we had destroyed an entire army. No military in human history has done what the American forces there. 7 Corps was the iron fist of the American forces, the Allied forces. And that was the pinnacle of American power. We've never been more unchallenged, ever. No one could come anywhere close. The Chinese and Russians were like, holy crap, what the hell? We're not even in the game with these guys. We better get there. And of course, America said, oh, well, this is the end of history. It's going to be like this forever. And it's been downhill ever since. And this is just more manifestations of it.
Well,
but we can come back.
In charge. That's what it comes down to. When you look at it, I mean, the whole idea of China, it's a great point that you bring up. I mean, China has basically their intelligence apparatus. It has infiltrated every aspect of our society, and our politicians either are too dumb to realize that, or they're on the Chinese take, obviously, with the Biden crime family that exists.
To acknowledge it, besides embarrassing them, because it's accountability, it demonstrates their failure. They're the guys in charge. It also requires hard choices and doing hard things. And they'd rather not do them. So it's not,
Do you think that they'd rather not do it? Or do you think it's more that they actually agree with the Chinese government? They'd like to import that Chinese surveillance state here into the United States.
I think they'd like to take bits and pieces, but they don't want the Chinese to take over because they know that they would lose their position. But they love a social credit score. Oh my gosh. They get Eric Swalwell and Fang turgid.
Well, that's what amazes me about these people, that they don't really stand for anything. It's raw power. And you brought it up, raw power. That's what they want. And this is politics. This is the game of politics. But have you noticed that people are fed up, and a growing number of people are getting fed up with everything that's going on?
Yes. And you saw it in Virginia with Glenn Youngkin. There's also the biggest story in American politics since Trump. And it's not covered very much at all. Democrats sure don't want to talk about it because they were betting on the other outcome. They were betting that Latinx Americans would be on the Democrat plantation forever. And Latinx Americans, very hardworking, faith-oriented, patriotic, have no intention of being puppets to a bunch of pasty-faced pinkos and their Chablis-swilling wine women. They want to be prosperous, and Democrats want them poor and angry, and and they want their children growing up in this bizarre, perverted groomer world. And someone married into a Latinx family, that's a no-go. 50% of Hispanic Americans are now supporting conservatives. That's the Democrats expected 80% for them forever. Another group that they would cultivate, and they would never lose another election. This has changed everything. Look for huge changes in New Mexico. Texas is going to stay red. Nevada with Adam Laxalt. These are huge. It is a huge deal. And the Democrats were outright counting on, owning this group. And of course, in their own condescending way, they believed it was a group. And now if you know any Hispanics, you know that there are many different flavors who all fall under that not very useful label. And it's a joy to behold the Democrats losing, because unfortunately, the Democrats, when they became the party of rich secular liberals from the suburbs, they lost, that part that was filled with God for normal people is filled with, their bizarre pinko ideology. It's now a religious thing. You can't turn on a dime and say, oh, global warming, not convenient. Now, politicians, good politicians, look at Willie Brown, who brought us Kamala Harris. I liked it how he hit it and quit it, so to speak. Very good politician. He could turn on a dime. He said, if you can't look at if you can't look at someone who paid you off and then screw him, you're no politician at all. Bill Clinton turned on a dime on crime. Remember the soft on crime Democrats getting killed? Bill Clinton said, how about we put criminals in jail?
The best thing that happened to Bill Clinton was Republicans winning the House back.
Yeah, and he became, and he betrayed his base for something more popular. If you are religious about it, you don't have that flexibility. They can't just say, turns out global warming is a giant hoax designed to steal money and power from normal people and shift it to a transnational global elite. We're not going to do that anymore. They can't do that. They can't turn around on guns. They certainly can't turn around on life. A smart Democrat would go back and steal safe, legal, and rare from Bill Clinton, which was an amazing formulation for abortion. I mean, you don't have to agree with it, but it has the benefit of acknowledging the other side while still accomplishing what he really wanted.
Yeah. And it's a
and
position
they can't do that.
a lot of Americans have.
These bizarre, pierced, tatted up weirdos. I don't understand why it's all these fat, ugly manatees screaming about abortion. Because
most without children.
But normal people look at that and they're like, I'm I'm not someone who thinks you should be able to abort. Maybe I'm flexible early on. It's distasteful. I don't want to think about it. But, if the kid's 8 months, 3 weeks old, you don't get to abort it. But the Democrats have to.
You had the friggin' former governor of Virginia advocating that we're going to make the baby comfortable after it's born and killing it. I mean, this is how radical it's become. I'm in New York, so I'm in a place where it's pretty much up until the day of birth. It's insane. So when we look at the radicalism of the left, and what amazes me, though, is not only how out of touch they are, but how bold they are, how they don't even try and hide it anymore. Joe Biden's whole, if you don't support me, you ain't black. Like, do you think that even in the black community, we're starting to see this shift and finally Republicans are going back into the areas that they surrendered 30, 40, 50 years ago?
Well, unlike Democrats, I don't presume to speak for black people. I do know that Republicans are thrilled when black Americans join with us. There's nothing a Republican loves more, because we know we have to earn that support. Democrats take it for granted. And I think that's going to be one of the last blocks to break, but I think it will break because it's just not bringing any benefit. A coalition that's basically neurotic suburban housewives, commie faculty members, and some portion of the black community is just not going to make majorities across the country.
No, it's certainly not. And in your book, the idea of people now rising up, people now pushing back, you say that the ingredients are there. The ingredients are there to bring back the greatness. How do you see it playing out over the next couple of years? I know this is a long-term battle, but over the next couple of years.
I think in the next couple of years, we're going to fight close engagements like 2022, 2022, 2024. I think we're going to take the House back. We'll probably take the Senate back. And then we can, oversee, stop, and compromise for a couple of years. We need the president. And depending on how bad Biden does, and there is no bottom. He's hit in the low 30s now. This guy can go into the 20s. When you see gas hitting $11 a gallon, which it will, because he can't make a turnaround. He can't say, I'm opening up Keystone. I'm opening up the gas fields. He can't do it.
But I can't understand that. And I understand it. But as far as politics goes, I can't imagine that there's not people around them saying this is suicide for our party. Like, you want to try and make these gains in green energy or whatever.
Would you want to stand up at a faculty meeting and say, you know what? Maybe you shouldn't have been able to abort kids. They'll look at you like you're crazy.
I'm outspoken at my college, so I've been known.
But there's only like one of you.
Yes.
Okay, so you're not going to make the change. They're not going to listen to you. They're going to listen to each other. One of the changes about conservatives is we used to be very rationalistic, materialistic. We used to think, like in Hollywood. Remember how it's always leftist? And 10 years ago, we would say, once some Hollywood producer discovers there's a bunch of conservative Americans out there, why, they're going to make conservative stuff and make a mint. But that didn't happen.
No, it didn't. Even after so many Christian movies have succeeded and done far better than the other crap that comes out.
Exactly. But it hasn't happened in the mainstream yet. It's happened at the fringe a little bit, but it hasn't happened the way we would expect, because there's a huge market out there. Top Gun proves it. The fact is, it's not merely money, and it's not merely political offices. It is social currency, remaining part of the club, getting positive vibes, getting a pat on the head. That has a huge value, and that influences people in a way maybe we didn't understand, because a lot of us are business people. I'm a lawyer. If I'm not making money, I'm either making money or I'm not. But this is different. This is part of their entire life. So when they green light some commie nonsense, they might not make any money on it, but they're going to get invited to the right parties. And there's a value to that. We look at like National Review. Finally, somebody came along who's going to do all the things that they promised that they would do for decades, but they couldn't accept him because he wasn't them. And that it was much more that it's not us getting the credit over mean tweets. William Buckley would have had plenty of mean tweets, maybe not with Rosie O'Donnell and instead Gore Vidal, but he'd have plenty of mean tweets. But he was one of them. And frankly, I think if he was still around, the institution of National Review might still be as relevant as it used to be. It's there. I have good friends who work on it, but let's face it, it doesn't have the heat. Weekly Standard, of course, is gone. They scuttled that cruise ship.
I wonder why.
Yeah, boy. The Bulwark, come on. Who listens to the Bulwark except a bunch of liberal suckers in Silicon Valley who pay it? You know, it's just another scam. We're conservative. They were conservatives in quotation marks because that was the role they played in the establishment. And when the establishment got upended, they got upended too.
And that's such a good point. You see that the conservative movement is strong. Not only is it strong, I do think that conservatives have realized that they have to do something they didn't like to do before, and that's activism. You're seeing a lot of people, grassroots, going door to door, knocking on doors, changing people's minds, speaking to people. And conservatives took that hands-off approach. And I think your book is coming out at the perfect time because Americans do have to have a sense of optimism that there are better days ahead. And I really appreciate you taking the time out to speak to the audience here.
Oh, well, it's been my pleasure. It's been a lot of fun. And the book's a lot of fun. I want to make it clear, this isn't one of these bow-tied conservative books.
No,
you know, it's not long passages of John Locke. I try and talk to people like I talk to a jury. I'm trying to make a case. Maybe talk to them like I'm briefing soldiers. Maybe talk to them like I was a stand-up comic. I've got points I want to make. Sometimes I make it with little fictional vignettes because I think they illustrate things powerfully in a way just describing them objectively doesn't. I think it's a fun book. I think it's an interesting book. I write like a lawyer and a comic in that I try and make every line mean something. As a lawyer, you only have a set number of words or pages. So every sentence has to hit. You're going to write a bad brief if you just, spin your wheels.
And you do it in a way that ordinary people actually understand it.
I have to convince 12 people who couldn't get out of jury duty that they need to give my client money or not give the other guy money. That's my job. That's what I have to do. And I have to do it clearly. I have to do it in an amusing way. I try and make every line funny or important or thought-provoking. No filler.
Basically, you do the opposite.
Like the Ramones.
Pieces of legislation. Now, you should be in charge of just writing legislation. Like you have to write every single bill out there so that people like me can understand these bills that they're putting out. And they can't be longer than 20 pages. A lot of them are not
meant to be understood.
No, they're not. It is intentional. The government that governs best governs least. And yet here we are turning bill after bill after bill. It's ridiculous.
Well, you have a bunch of people who really have nothing else in life. There is a mentality in citizen legislators where they don't need to pass a bill. They don't need to do a big change because they're not there for a legacy. They're there for a term or two, and then they go home. You see a lot in state legislatures. Well, they're there to deal with big issues that can't be dealt with any other way.
And that's the way it should be. It shouldn't be paid positions. It should be that, you get a stipend to do, once every year, you meet up, debate the issues. If you could solve a problem, you solve it. If you can't, that's it. Nothing gets done. I'm okay with nothing getting done with government because every time they get something done, it makes things a lot worse.
Well, look, I mean, it's the legacy thing. That's why John Cornyn was so, excited over the gun control bill. That was going to be his legacy. Unfortunately, he's dumb. He doesn't understand it's not a good legacy. And it's going to get him, he doesn't understand how to read polls. He thinks in generic polls, would you support measures that would keep criminals from killing other Americans? No, I'm against that. I don't know. No opinion. Yeah, come on. And he reads that as, let's do whatever the Democrats say. And of course, his idea of a compromise is just to give them less than they really want.
And that's so infuriating because, as I always say, what happens when the next mass shooting comes? Then they're going to say, we didn't go far enough.
Because another one came of one of the people who was supposed to be stopped by these red flag laws, which are in effect in Illinois. And now it's like, well, you see, we got to do more. Wait, we just did. We just solved the problem. I was informed by, you. Again, it's power. I have a long chapter about the importance of an armed citizenry in We'll Be Back. And it is very important. And that is one of their keys. It not only materially makes us less powerful, because the idea of actually using weapons, shooting, it's almost a fringe idea, though I do talk about what a civil war would look like. And once you read that, your blood will be curdled and you won't want it.
No.
But it's a dignity thing. Citizens have the ability to change their government. The ability to change their government comes from a barrel of a gun. Chairman Mao was right about that. The citizens need the power and need to not allow their tool, which is government, to have a monopoly on violence. It needs to be there, if only for us to retain our dignity. They want to strip us of that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we have a president who constantly says that our founders never intended for the people to have weapons of war. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, no, that's exactly what they kind of intended.
Well, look, I mean, maybe we should defer to him because he knew them. No, I mean, this is why I don't argue with. I don't listen to it. It's a waste of time. It's a waste. You can't argue with somebody who says our democracy is under threat because a guy dressed like Conan with horns took selfies in the rotunda. It's objectively false. I'm not going to waste my time. I'm just going to take the levers of power and beat your brains out with it.
Yeah, you're talking about the event that was the equivalent to 9/11, right?
Yeah. It was the equivalent of a Jeffrey Toobin Zoom call. I mean, look, I was in the Los Angeles riots. I mean, I was in it with the Army for 3 weeks on the street in South Central. I don't need lessons in insurrection from anybody, including Maxine Waters, who
for an insurrection.
Encouraged the LA riots. So it's objectively stupid. I'm not going to argue with them. That's what they want. They want you to engage. I'm not going to engage. I'm just going to win and then do what we want. That's one reason I like Ron DeSantis so much. He doesn't engage with the enemy. He simply destroys them and then, urinates on the ruins.
Oh, I thought the funniest thing was when he told the kid to take off the mask. The masks don't work. Take it off. Finally, a politician actually said it. He said it out loud.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. It was remarkable.
It was. And Kurt, I appreciate you coming on. Everyone's got to check out the book. We'll be back. The Fall and Rise of America. I'll have links up at the PAS Report website, pasreport.com. So check it out. Kurt, amazing. And I wish you all the best of luck with this book. And your articles, I have to tell everyone, go to townhall.com. Check out Kurt's articles. They're succinct. They're on point, and a lot of them are hysterical. You really know how to formulate the arguments well for conservatism. That I could say.
I appreciate it. Thanks a lot, man. Great to be here.
I'm glad the PAS Report audience was able to hear from Kurt. He's a great guy, extremely smart, personable. He knows the language of ordinary people, and I suggest everyone checks out his new book, We'll Be Back, The Fall and Rise of America. Also, give him a follow. I have all the links up at the PAS Report website in the show notes, pasreport.com. I want to thank you for joining me today, and I'll be back on Wednesday with another great episode of the PAS Report podcast.
Thank you for listening to the PAS Report Weekly Roundup Podcast.
Have a good one. Bye.
Be sure to rate, share, and subscribe to the podcast so you'll never miss an episode. Also, visit PASReport.com and follow us on Twitter at PAS Report.